spread the word. We also
Now, the life of the monarch butterfly I find incredibly interesting. And if you have ever been lucky enough to see the life of a butterfly, particularly a monarch, but any of them, from egg all the way to adult, and then watch the cycle start over again, it's absolutely amazing. It's rewarding to be a part of, it's rewarding to see parts of, and I'm just going to show you a bit of the progression of the stages of a monarch as it goes through its life cycle. The reason that I have these pictures is because I do rear them, so each end of August or so, I start to go outside and I look for eggs and caterpillars, and if I find any, I take them home and I set them up in rearing cages, and I take them through that, through all the different life cycles until they're adults, at which point I tag them and release them. So, they start off as this, a tiny little egg, and they're only like that for about 1 to 3 days. They're kind of a football shape, and you find them on their host plant, which we'll talk about later. And once you've seen 1 or 2, you'll know them. So I often take people in the summertime to show them how to look for monarch eggs, and you know, there's a lot of stuff that can be attached to the bottom of a leaf, but they are pretty distinct once you've actually seen them a couple times. Beautiful as well. These are pictures given to me from another woman that's very passionate about rearing monarchs. And yes.
What time of year would you see those?
The eggs, generally, well, that's a good question. I look for the ones that I want to tag. So the butterflies that actually head south in the fall. They're the ones that emerge from eggs at the end of August and in September. However, there are other generations. You can find generations growing throughout the summer as well. The best time to look though, especially if you want to get involved in this, end of August and September, early September. Yeah. So this is what they look like when they're just about ready to hatch out of the egg. You can see that, you see the black at the top, that's his head. So when he comes out, it doesn't exactly look like the striped caterpillar that we saw a picture of earlier. They are absolutely tiny, teeny tiny, and their head is about the size of a pinhead, and it's black. So basically the shell has gone clear, and we know that it's just about to emerge at this stage. And then, it's a little washed out, I'm hoping you can see this okay, but at the top there, that's the first step. He's just poking his head out. He crawls out a little bit more, and then this is what it looks like when he's fully emerged. And he's actually eating his eggshell at this point. That's his first meal in life. And it gets him going. We were lucky enough, actually, Kari and I were lucky enough to watch this happen and record it, and you could actually see him. He came out of his shell, he turned around, and then he ate his whole shell. And we watched it. Yes.
all your caterpillars there would be preferring their meat.
Yes. That's because I've chosen that. I can say she for a while. No. It. Yes. So this is actually called the instar, the first instar, sorry. Instar is basically, as a caterpillar grows, it molts. It has to shed its skin, much like a snake as it grows. Because the skin, it can only grow so large within its skin, and then the skin splits open, and it allows it to change. It goes through 5 different instars until it finally reaches this stage. By the second instar, it has those black, yellow, and white stripes, so it's more recognizable as a monarch caterpillar. The 5th instar is pretty big. It's pretty much the size of my forefinger, so they're a significant size. Easy to spot if you know what you're looking for again. And like it says there, they're in this stage caterpillar stage for about 2 weeks, and then something very cool happens. But it does take about 24 days from when the egg is laid until the caterpillar actually turns into skin falls off. The black patch at the top, that's the cremaster that it's just jammed up into its silk patch. It's like hooks, basically. It hooks into it. It's actually pretty sturdy when you think. Butterflies hanging upside down outside until it turns in, or sorry, the pupa is until it turns into a butterfly. So it's got to be pretty tough to withstand weather conditions and things like that. So that's the pupa that's in the process of forming. And this takes minutes. If you go to work one day and your caterpillar is in its 5th instar, it's the size of your finger, you can very easily miss this. I watch these things like a hawk when I have them because I'll be reading on the couch and just glancing over every 3 minutes. It's literally 5 minutes from the time that caterpillar starts to wiggle around and do this pupa dance to when it looks like that. That's quite finished. It takes a little longer to look that perfect, but for it to actually shed its skin, get through this process, and be a fragile pupa takes about 5 minutes. And then with a little bit of time, it smooths out and has that beautiful look that we're all familiar with. Gold specks on it. They're just absolutely gorgeous creatures. But yeah, you definitely have to pay attention.
Will the caterpillar take Monarch's host plant, or will it search for them in the wild?
It can do either. Yeah.
I follow the caterpillar stage and then I disappear. I
Yeah.
see it, but I do know that she will elsewhere.
Oh yeah, definitely elsewhere. They will do it on their host plant, but generally they actually walk away from that plant. I'm trying not to say the name of that plant yet. Generally they will walk away. Like usually when I have them, it's not on the plant, it's at the top of the rearing cage that they'll do it. Vicky,
Yeah, I heard that they walk away from the host plant because it's easy for predators to find them on the host plant.
probably.
When I kept them through that stage, I've taken something that isn't a host plant and put it in a cage.
Yeah.
And when they start, they always nest on them.
Yeah.
To it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is pretty good. I've never found one on the host plant either, but I'm sure other than the ones that are in my cage, but that's not exactly replicating life. So from there are about 10-14 days in that stage, and then you'll notice that it starts to get a bit darker, and that's when you have about 24 hours, and then it's actually going to emerge. Again, it becomes clear. They've gone through a complete metamorphosis. So some insects, just life cycles of insects, there's 2 different kinds. The butterflies do complete metamorphosis, which means they absolutely and totally change from when they are born, when they're in larva stage, pupa, and then when they are adults. They liquefy in that chrysalis, and then they come out. You can see this one starting to emerge. I know you can't quite see past me. And then they tumble out, and as you can see, they look pretty awkward at first. They have tiny little wings and great big swollen abdomens, and that's because the abdomen is full of liquid that when they start to flap their wings, the liquid moves from the abdomen, it's pumped into the wings, and then the wings actually, you watch them just expand into these big, beautiful, functional things. Pretty fragile for the first little while. If you do end up raising some of your own, you don't generally touch them for the first few hours. And then it's time to release them. So where do monarchs live? That's my next question for you. That's also a broad question, purposely. So where do they live? On milkweed, sure. Sometimes.
In Mexico.
In Mexico. In Ontario. That's right. Yeah, open fields. There we go. So we've got habitat, location, specific plants. That's good. They are migratory, so that's a hard question to answer. But they start off on this plant, which I'm sure most of you recognize. What is it? It is 3 different varieties, or different species of milkweed. That's right. So common milkweed, butterfly milkweed, swamp milkweed. These are 3 examples that are native to Ontario. And the milkweed plant is the only plant that the monarch butterfly in the larval stage will be able to eat. Without milkweed, there are no monarch caterpillars. Period. So, if you'd like to have monarchs in your garden, if you'd like to feed the larval stage, you need to have some kind of milkweed, which generally butterfly and swamp milkweed are two that can be recommended for gardens. But they're beautiful plants. Common milkweed is, in some areas, including Ontario, considered a noxious weed, and there are sometimes, depending where you are, there are regulations on whether or not you can plant that. But these ones are perfectly fine. Does anyone know? Oh, I should do this first. So, and the other answer to that question is that they live in a community just like we do. So, milkweed is a community all of its own. It's got many other creatures, not just insects, that call it home, including the ones that I've listed here, but not limited to those. And some of those are, somebody was asking me earlier what eats the monarch. So some of these are predators of the monarch, such as this taquinid fly, or a wasp that also visits milkweed to lay its eggs. Both of these do lay its eggs inside the caterpillar. So sometimes when I bring caterpillars in and I'm rearing them, something goes wrong. And I'm usually very careful about not feeding it, for example, milkweed from roadsides that might have been sprayed. So I don't think that's the problem. And then I may see a little web coming from the caterpillar when it's crawled around, it's stopped moving, it's not looking very well. A little web will come out, and that's usually an indication that something has laid an egg in it, probably the taquinid fly, and it's been parasitized. So parasitism is a problem for monarch caterpillars, but it's also part of the community. It's the way it works, it's the way nature works. So that does happen sometimes. It's something you will come across if you end up raising butterflies. But it's amazing when you start to look at milkweed, when you're looking for caterpillars, because you'll see all of these other creatures and get to know them too. And it's just amazing. You can come across a plant that's just so full of life, with all these different creatures living on it, sharing the same plant with the butterfly, or with the caterpillar. But why would it live on milkweed? Well, it is its food. I mean, that's obviously important. But milkweed, the milky substance that comes out of it, is actually a poison. It has cardiac glycosides in it, which that's what makes the caterpillar, basically, when it eats it, the cardiac glycosides end up in the exoskeleton. So that's what makes it very distasteful to other predators like birds, for example. There aren't that many that really like the taste. So they don't generally get predated by birds. It's more in the insect world that will happen. And then, of course, when you inject poison into yourself so that other things don't eat you, you avoid this, which is what they're trying to do. So their journey is also an amazing one. I'm just kind of skimming over different topics of the monarch with this presentation with fairly little time. There's a lot to talk about, so I'm trying to just give you tidbits of information to intrigue you. As someone else said, they do live in Ontario, they do live in Mexico, and they live in the entire area all the way down there as well because they are migratory. So in the fall, we have a group of monarchs here that, like I said, emerges in end of August, early September, and then they make this journey. They come from Ontario or other parts of the northern states or southern Canada, and they travel through the continental U.S. all the way down to Mexico. That's a huge journey for what we would consider a fragile creature, which really are pretty tough, but I mean, they're this big, they're somewhat fragile. So they get all the way down to Mexico, and that is where they overwinter. And they overwinter in a very specific place in Mexico. It's at a high elevation, it's in the mountains, it's on specific trees, and they are very, very concentrated down there. And basically, that's the area where the conditions are perfect for them to survive a winter. They're not hibernating, they're in reproductive diapause, which means that they, unlike the butterflies, the other generations before them, they are not reproducing yet. They're going to live for a solid 8 months back here to Ontario. And then even when they're here, it could take a couple more generations to reach the fall. So in the end, you can have 5 or 6 generations of monarchs in 1 year. Somehow, one of those generations will get to Mexico, never having been there before. Somehow, the new generations will get back to Ontario, never having been here before. So, again, just an incredible story. And there is a lot of research going into that right now. I know at the University of Guelph are doing research into it to try to figure out in more detail exactly how that works. There is also a Western population. They don't go to Mexico. They kind of do their own thing and stay on the West Coast. I don't know as much about that also. And this is where they end up. Yes?
Does it have any genetic difference or DNA difference between the ones that stay, that go down the eastern seaboard instead of the ones that
I believe so. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but I do believe I read that.
What was the question?
Have they found genetic differences between the two distinct populations? No. Yes.
Sorry, was it 5 or 6 generations to go from Mexico to Canada or Canada to Mexico? Or was it there and back?
Entire thing. So if we go August to August, say, so a butterfly emerges in August, goes to Mexico, comes to Texas, lays an egg, dies, and from there you could have 4 or 5 more until the one emerges in August again. Yeah. And this is what it looks like when they get to Mexico. This is probably on an OML fir tree. That's their preferred tree. And they are so concentrated in this one area that gives them what they need that it actually looks like this. And I'm going to show you a video shortly, just so you can get a feel for what it would be like to be there. Actually, I'll show it to you now. So it's, I don't have sound for this, and I know David Attenborough, but I will lightly narrate as we go. I mostly want you to see this, though, because I think until you've, well, I think until you've seen it with your own eyes, which I haven't either, you just couldn't understand. So there are about 50 million butterflies per hectare when they get down there. And I just wanted you to see the density of what it looks like when they get there. They're generally very inactive when they're there. They tend to pretty much stay in one spot unless it's a pretty warm day. They'll fly to the ground to huddle and get some minerals and moisture.
What is that area protected?
A large part of it is, yeah, there's a place called El Rosario, which is a great big protected reserve specifically for them. Yeah. They are working very hard to protect them down there.
Are they sleeping?
No, they actually don't eat when they're down there. That's a really good question.
They don't why they are on that specific tree?
I don't know.
Why are they listed as a special concern if they're going to 50 million?
The numbers fluctuate drastically from year to year. And realistically, that number is actually much, much smaller than it used to be. And for an insect, that's not really that many. But they're special concern as well because of the threats that face them. So they're not an endangered species. At risk is kind of a general term that means that they are at risk of becoming, endangered or threatened. And you can stop that now. So because of the threats that face them, basically we can foresee that it could be very detrimental to their population. So, and that's actually my next slide, is what are the different obstacles that they face that make them a species at risk. And there are a few of them. Everybody likes to say, well, in Mexico they cut down the trees, but sure, that's true. There is some illegal logging in Mexico, and because they're so concentrated in that small area, yes, that could have a very drastic effect. But what about here? They don't just live in Mexico. What about when they're in the caterpillar stages in our backyard? What about when they are traveling up to 4,000 kilometers across the continental US and need to stop every single day to refuel to be able to get to their destination. So these are all things that they need to have from beginning to end to make it. So we can make a difference too. We have to make sure that they have their larval plant here, milkweed. We have to make sure that from here all the way to Mexico there are nectar plants, because that is what the adult needs. They feed on nectar. And if they can't get that fuel every single day, they can't get to Mexico. That's a pretty long journey. You know, up to 100 kilometers a day as a butterfly? That's amazing. Spraying crops. Big monoculture crops. I mean, if we spray for insects, generally it's for insects. It's not usually very specific. It's very difficult to make a pesticide that's species specific. So if it kills this bug, it also kills a whole menu of other insects as well, including butterflies. And then, yes, also illegal logging in Mexico is a legitimate issue as well. So there are lots of things that can be done to make their lives a little bit easier. And I think I'm starting to, yeah, I'm definitely running out of time. So, what you can do, this is actually, I'm doing a workshop this afternoon, and this is what I'm going to get more into, is what you can do to help them, but very briefly, gardening responsibly, and generally gardening responsibly by default is gardening for wildlife. So using native plants as much as possible, not spraying anything in your garden, you know, being conscious of all of these things, planting larval and host plants, raising and releasing caterpillars. That's something that anybody can do, and it's a very rewarding experience, but it also does help the butterfly in the end, because you can tag it, you can contribute to research through tagging. That's why we tag. All of the data is accumulated by a university, and then they actually track numbers throughout years so we can see if their numbers are actually declining or where they're coming from. Lots of information comes from that. Get out and see the butterflies, because getting outside and making that connection to them is where it all starts. And by doing that and by sharing that with other people, spreading the word, you know what, that's why I'm an educator. It's because showing other people and giving other people this kind of experience is really what's going to make the difference in the end, because now maybe 10 more people will go try planting some native plants, and that's what they need. So here are some resources. I'll just leave this up while I ask if there are any questions. These are all great. I took the Monarch Teacher Network training a couple years ago. It was awesome if you are a teacher, an educator, or not. If you just want to learn a whole lot about butterflies and how you can make a difference, that's a wonderful course to take. Monarch Watch. Anything you want to know about butterflies, just go there. It's a really good spot to start. Journey north, there are lots of resources available. So I wanted to just leave you with that to start. If you would like to get more into it, certainly join the discussion later. But how much time do I have for questions? Probably 2 minutes or so. Not much. Okay, go ahead.
Within the milkweed community, orange seems to be the dominant color. I understand that, let's say to ward off predators, bright colors are used, but is there any type of pigment given off by milkweed to initiate this orange color within all the species that live on it?
There's actually quite a range of colors. A lot of them are very pink and fuchsia. There's a couple that are bright orange, but there is kind of a range. The warning coloration is really in the butterfly itself. I wouldn't say that the plant is necessarily. Usually, what a bright color in a plant is actually to attract certain pollinators more than repel. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Is there do butterflies have a preference for like milkweeds? I'm just thinking about the common milkweed being a noxious weed. That sounds like a problem for them.
Well, it is in some cases, yeah. As long as it's a milkweed species, they'll use it.
Has it been in decline in milkweed in Ontario?
Yes, there has. It is
Yeah, I was gonna say, you don't see it.
Yeah. Common milkweed is the one that if one is going to get removed, it's going to be common milkweed, and because it is the most common, it's more commonly a problem. So there has been a decline. Yes, there is. It is hard to find in certain areas. Mowing is a big problem. Just mowing fields down in general, and replacing it with grass. Turf is the second largest crop in the U.S. Can you believe that? That just blows my mind. When they mow, that's the biggest problem, because you're getting rid of nectar and larval plants at the same time. It's not, so much individually removing milkweed. It's doing practices like that that really cause a big problem. Yeah.
Have you ever had one of the egg butterflies reaches Mexico to be done?
I don't know yet. Apparently, if your tag butterfly is found, if the tag is found, you'll get a little certificate sent to you to say that it's been found. So I haven't received that yet, but imagine how hard it would be though to even find that little tag butterfly. So it could have made it there, and I may never find out, but it's possible. By the way, feel free to cut me off whenever you need to. Okay? Yes.
Is it true that the monarch caterpillars prefer the larger milkweed plants? So you have a field that's just regenerating, and it's just tiny plants and
I can't say. Yes, good point. So the question is if monarch caterpillars prefer larger or smaller milkweeds. I can't say I know for sure, but I found them on both. I haven't noticed a difference between the two. Definitely have to just know what you're looking for, I guess. You're always flipping the leaf out and looking on the bottom, but I'm not sure. I actually find some of the smaller ones are fresher, more tender leaf. And sometimes when they get big, they aren't as high a quality. So, but I can't say for sure. Yes?
When you're raising butterflies, do you have to do it just in the summer? Because if you raise them in the winter, would that upset the cycle? And the butterflies wouldn't know when to go to Mexico?
Yes, that's right. You want to follow the life cycle. Really, you don't have much of a choice. They go through their life cycle the way they do it. So when you find an egg and you bring it inside, it's going to do what it's going to do. And it'll be done by the end of September, and you'll be releasing it, and there's really nothing you can do. Butterflies don't overwinter. Monarchs do not overwinter as a chrysalis. So if you were to try to keep it, it would just die.
Could you repeat the name of the tree that they're attracted to in Mexico?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Could you repeat the name of the tree species that they're attracted to?
Yeah, they're attracted to the oyamel fir. That's the primary tree, and I believe there's a second one, but I don't know what the second one is. But it's primarily a forest made of those fir trees. So.
Just as, can I ask Paul, is that one of the illegal log species in Mexico?
I would assume so. I think it's more that basically they need wood to build, to burn, and they take sections of the forest within areas that the monarch goes. I don't know if they specifically go for that tree or more just whatever is accessible. I'm not sure. Thanks for all your questions.
Thank you very much, Kristen. That was really interesting. And because you know that if you would like to have more time to ask more questions and learn more about tagging and raising butterflies, then please sign up for the workshop that Kristen will be giving this afternoon. And the workshop, in case you missed it, the workshop sign-up sheets are over on the registration table. Yes, Peter.
Just one point of interest to the audience here. It was a Canadian husband and wife team who worked on butterfly migrations for 40 years, who actually broke the story and found out how it all happened. So it's something that Canadians can be well and truly proud of.
Great, that's good to hear. Great, thank you. So we'll take a short break now and reconvene at 10:40 for the next presentation.